On today's show, I think the Cavs are better suited now for postseason basketball than they were before. I'll tell you why on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot. And you're listening to another edition of Locked On Cavs, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in all of America. You can find this show and any other Locked On podcasts anywhere you get them. That's Apple, that's Spotify. That is YouTube as well. If you're watching right now, please hit the thumbs up button and the notification bell and make sure you're subscribed wherever you might be enjoying Locked On Cavs. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. On today's show, I'll tell you why I think the Cavs are better suited for the postseason now than they have been at any other point in this era. We'll talk about Evan Mobley's growth and even some offseason plans as far as what the roster might look like for the Cavs. We also will probably dive in a little bit to All-Star Weekend and just some of the things that we did see. But this is a continuation of the mailbag episode from Friday. I had over 40 submissions for questions. I had several great ones. I needed to ultimately split it up into 2 episodes because there was just too much good stuff that I could not squeeze it all into one episode. So this one's going to begin with a question from the Clevalier on Twitter, who asks, why do you think Kenny changed so much of his approach from what worked last year to now? They changed a lot in the playoffs to an ISO-style basketball, which has always hindered the Cavs. What do you think the addition of Harden does to change this approach, if at all? So I do think that when you look at the way that the Cavs have approached this year from a schematic point of view, things were always going to be a little bit different. And part of the reason why things were always going to be different is the personnel is different. Like, think back to who the Cavs were last year and who they had available. I think that it's safe to say we have seen over the past 2 years, we are on our 4th version of the Cavs. Because you think back to who the Cavs were at the start of the season last year, where they were this incredibly deep basketball team. Karis LeVert played really well for them. Obviously, George Niang was part of the rotation. Then those two get traded to Atlanta in exchange for DeAndre Hunter. And DeAndre Hunter had a great second half of the season in Cleveland. But like, that version of the Cavs was a different team than what we saw earlier in the season, right? Like, those were 2 different teams. And then this year, with no Darius Garland or at least a very limited Darius Garland for most of the time that he was on the floor when he was on the Cavs, is version number 3. And then you trade Garland for James Harden, you're on the 4th version of the Cavs that Kenny Atkinson is realistically coached. So as far as the schematic approaches, I do think a lot of it has to do with personnel. Like, were the Cavs better last year because they played a different style of basketball, or were they better last year because they were healthier? Like, we have 27 Cavalier games left this season, and they have already missed far more games due to injury this year than they did all of last year. And that is something that does have to be part of this conversation. I think that the biggest reason for Cleveland's success last season in the regular season is because the team was really, really freaking good. The second biggest reason was because they were also really healthy. Darius Garland played 75 games. Jared Allen played in all 82. I believe Evan Mobley played 71. I think Donovan Mitchell played 68. Like, this was not something where they were trying to piece things together the same way that they have been so far this year. But you are right. Like, there was more ball movement last year. I do think that they played a little bit of a different style of basketball. And then, as we have seen, when the postseason arrives, things tend to change. But I also look at it and say, well, the Cavs didn't look all that different against the Miami Heat. They look different against Indiana. And part of that is the Pacers were obviously a very, very good team last year. But I also do think injuries had a lot to do with that. We will never know this answer. There's no way to know it, and it's something that I think is going to bother a lot of Cavs fans forever. But we will never know what the Cavs would have looked like, a healthy version of the Cavs, what they would have looked like against the Indiana Pacers in the playoffs last year. We will never know if they would have won that series. Maybe it's the same outcome no matter what. Maybe Indiana was just a team of destiny to a certain extent before Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. We will never know those answers. But we also don't know that it would not have worked, right? Like, that is something that I do think is worth thinking about. Now, as far as the Harden acquisition, I do think this is something that makes the Cavs a better postseason team this year. And I know that there are some people that are going to roll their eyes at that comment because James Harden is not the guy that exactly has the most sterling postseason track record. I get that. But he has been there. He has done that. He's been in a lot of postseason games. I mean, there are very few guys that have played as many playoff games as he has that are active in the NBA right now. So I think that is something to bring into account. But I also look at the role that he's going to be in, and that is something that I do think could be pretty beneficial to the Cavs. I look at where they're at right now, and James Harden has, for a good chunk of his career, most of his career, been the best player on his team. He's not been the best player on his team since he left Houston, right? He goes from Houston to Brooklyn, and he teams up with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant is the best player on that team. James Harden is the second best player. Kyrie Irving is the third best player. Then he's traded from Brooklyn to Philadelphia, where Joel Embiid wins an MVP award with James Harden at his side. Obviously, Embiid is the best player on that team. And then from there, he goes to the Clippers. And I don't want to say he wasn't the best player. Like, I do think Kawhi is a better basketball player than him, but James Harden is just infinitely more available. So there's a discussion to be had there because he was just the guy that was playing more minutes. Like, that matters as part of this conversation. But now I look at this, and the thing that is different about all of those teams versus now is James Harden has never been the second best guard on a basketball team. That is something I feel pretty confident. And Donovan Mitchell right now is the better basketball player. I don't think that's a discussion point. Like, historically, Harden's an MVP. You know, he's made so many first-team All-NBAs. Like, I'm not having that discussion. I'm having the discussion right here, right now, who's better at basketball. And I think Donovan Mitchell's the answer to that. So what does that make James Harden's role look like in the postseason? That is something that I don't know we have the complete answer to, and we won't until the postseason begins for the Cavs. But I do think that he's going to be very beneficial in terms of taking some of the load off of Donovan Mitchell's plate. I'm very interested. What is it going to look like when James Harden doesn't have to be the guy in the postseason down the stretch? Because even in Philadelphia, one, Joel Embiid did miss a significant amount of postseason games because of injuries. But two, Joel Embiid is not somebody that can do everything himself, because big guys in the NBA, with the exception really of Nikola Jokic, who is basically a point center, big guys in the NBA don't have that, right? Like, they need somebody to get things going for them. And now James Harden has somebody else that can get things going for himself. And Kawhi Leonard could certainly do that and was capable of doing that in LA with the Clippers. And Kevin Durant was with the Brooklyn Nets. And I think that Nets team was very close to actually winning a title, considering how good they were. And I mean, it basically feels like a once in 100-year thing may have prevented them from winning a championship, with Kyrie Irving's vaccination status being that thing. And Harden did have a hamstring injury during that series against the Bucks too, which is worth noting. But I just look at this and say, they now have more firepower. They also, I think, have less places to pick on defensively. Like, is James Harden a good defensive player? No, he's not. But he's also got size, and he's got an ability for the Cavs to be able to hide him in different areas. And I am curious, one of the things I would be fascinated to see over the course of the rest of the regular season is, what do the Cavs look like defensively when James Harden is on the floor? How do they deploy him? Where do they put him? One of the drawbacks of Darius Garland defensively is not just that he was not a good defender. It's that he had to defend guards because he was 6'1", where James Harden doesn't have to be put on a guard. If a team has two good guards, like, for instance, let's look at who could the Philadelphia 76ers have in a starting five in the playoffs, right? You know, they're going to have Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, Paul George when he gets back from his suspension, Joel Embiid, and then that fifth starter could be Kelly Oubre. It could be somebody else. Like, they have a few different options. James Harden can go on that wing. He doesn't need to defend VJ Edgecombe. He doesn't need to defend Tyrese Maxey. He could theoretically be put on Paul George, and you have a little bit more defensive flexibility. So I do think that is part of the reason that this team is better suited for the postseason. And they also have somebody in James Harden that I think is going to really elevate the minutes in which Donovan Mitchell is not on the bench. And those are not going to be the biggest postseason minutes. And he doesn't need to do it by scoring, because I don't know how many times we can look at this and just say, you know what, the best player on any given team is on the bench, and that team still has just an absolutely elite level pick and roll duo, because that's what the Cavs are going to have. Like, James Harden has already, I think, made life very, very easy for Jared Allen. I think he's going to make life even easier. Like, the fact that those two look as good together through 3 games so far is an incredibly positive sign for the Cavs. The more opportunities they get to work together, I do think we're going to see that tandem get even better. And I think that grouping should be a very, very good one when the postseason arrives. I'm very interested to see what happens when the postseason arrives, what happens when Evan Mobley is healthy. Like, there are a lot of questions that I think we still need to answer as far as James Harden goes, as far as what this team is actually going to look like. But I do think it's fair to be optimistic with the direction that this team is headed. And I think it's fair, and we will talk about this a little bit on tomorrow's edition of Locked on Cavs. I think it's fair, and FanDuel agrees with me right now. I think it is fair to look at the Cavs and say they are the favorites in the Eastern Conference. Now, Evan Mobley maybe hasn't had the best season. He did have a good stint prior to this latest calf injury. He should be back very soon, but should he have been drafted as high as he was? Like, what is it to make of Evan Mobley so far in his career? I'll answer that question, and then we will get into the All-Star game next, right here on Locked on Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Have you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? Well, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for your shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. And if you're looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock in, and it might just be your Cleveland Cavaliers. As I record this, it is 8:10 p.m. Eastern Time, Sunday, February 15th. The All-Star game just wrapped up. Your Cleveland Cavaliers are the favorites to win the Eastern Conference on FanDuel. They are plus 330 to win the Eastern Conference and advance to the finals. Maybe that's a future you want to put down. Maybe you're not a big believer in the Cavs to win the Eastern Conference. I am. I think they should be the favorites. I think they're the most talented team in the East. We'll have to wait and see. But if you do that with FanDuel, now is the time to do it, because visit FanDuel.com today to get started. There's FanDuel.com today to get started. Use that profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making today's edition of Locked on Cavs your first listen. Thank you to those of you that make Locked on Cavs your first listen every single day. And if you are an everydayer, please check out the Everydayer Club. You get Locked on Cavs ad-free, and with the Everydayer Club, you also get members-only Discord access. Join at the link in the show description for more. So another question that came in that I was very interested in discussing comes from Michael Rossin. I hope the last name is Rossin. I apologize if I mispronounced that. I'm in a group chat with 5 other Caps fans, and I would like you to settle a debate on Evan Mobley. I think he's a really good player with some offensive deficiencies while being an elite defensive big. Some guys think he's a bust and should not have been drafted so high. What are your thoughts? So he's not the perfect offensive player, Michael. I think that much is fair to say. Like, he has not taken the step forward offensively that so many people, myself included, expected him to take this season. I thought that he was going to be a guy, especially while we were waiting for Darius Garland to get back to full strength. I thought Evan, and maybe if Evan had been a better offensive version of himself this year, then maybe they don't trade Darius Garland. Maybe they don't trade for James Harden. I don't know. Like, his offensive numbers are down. He's averaging almost a point less per game than he did last year, but it's still a step up from 2 years ago. He's not going to be an all-NBA player in all likelihood this year, but I do think that there are some things offensively that have been good. Now, he's not shot the ball well from beyond the arc. He's only shooting 30% from three after being 37% in each of the last 2 seasons. Also, his 2-point percentage has gone down, although that is something that has been trending up as of late. But the one thing I do look at as an improvement for him is his passing. I think has been much better. He's averaging 4 assists per game, which is a career high. Also averaging 2 blocks a game and a steal a game. Like, defensively, I know that this is mostly geared towards his offense. Defensively, he won Defensive Player of the Year last season. I think he has been a better defensive presence so far this season with what he's been doing. I think he has been an absolute star on that end of the floor. And I do think it's silly right now to say that Evan Mobley shouldn't have been drafted as high as he was. Like, part of this is maybe you go back through that NBA draft, the 2021 NBA draft, in which Evan Mobley was the 3rd overall selection. So Cade Cunningham went first in that draft, picked by the Pistons, got off to a very not great start to his career. A lot of that was he was on some really bad teams in Detroit. But I do think in a redraft, and I have kind of never wavered off of this position, I think if you did a redraft, Cade should and would still go number 1 overall. Then Jalen Green went number 2. If you had your pick right now, who would you take? Evan Mobley or Jalen Green? I think everybody would take Evan Mobley. I think all 30 teams in the NBA, they're given an option of, hey, you can have Evan Mobley or you can have Jalen Green. I think everybody takes Evan Mobley. Then Scotty Barnes went, who has had an up and down career. He had a very good second season, a not very good third season, and he's having a very good fifth season right now. Like, he was an all-star, has had a great start to his career. Then you get into Jalen Suggs. Everybody's taking Evan over him. Josh Giddey, again, everyone's taking Evan over him. Jonathan Kuminga, same thing. Franz Wagner might be the next interesting one. I think most teams would probably still take Evan because it's not as if he doesn't have this super high offensive upside that he just hasn't gotten to while being this incredibly high floor player. And let's be fair here, Franz Wagner has missed a lot of time because of injuries too. Like this season, he's not been on the floor. Like for everything that Evan has not been great at this year, he's had a better season than Franz Wagner because he's been available. There are just, and I think it is too, I think it's unfair to start to get deep into the draft and be like, that guy should have been picked over Evan Mobley. Because Alperen Şengün, who made an all-star team, I don't think should have been an all-star. I don't think he's having a very good year. Would you take him over Evan Mobley right now? Probably not. But you also, like, there was no world in which he was going to be a top 5 pick. Nobody would have picked him top 5. Jalen Johnson in Atlanta has been freaking awesome. Nobody was taking him in the top 5. So I think that Trey Murphy, same thing. Nobody was going to take him in the top 5. So I think that you have to look at it through that way. Like, has Evan been? I mean, Evan is too, I want to say, the most decorated player in his class. I believe he's so far is the only guy in his draft class to be second team All NBA, which he was last year. I understand this year has not been the best year for Evan Mobley. It is what it is, but that doesn't mean that he's a bust. He's an extremely high floor player. The Cavs need him to be better offensively than he has been so far. But I look at this and say he's not a bust. Drafting him in the top 5 was the right decision. And I think if the Cavs were given the opportunity with who was still on the board at that point, it's the same exact, they would have made the same exact decision that they made back in 2021. But moving on to the next question from Buddy Benson on Twitter. What do you think the Cavs offseason plans will be? Will James Harden be back on his player option or an extension? Possibility of LeBron, Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I want to start with the Harden part of this. James Harden will be back in Cleveland next year. Like, I do not think that the Cavs trade away a 26-year-old version of Darius Garland for a 36-year-old version of James Harden, who right now is the better player, to only have him for half a season. Now, I don't know if there's like some wink, wink, nod, nod deal as far as what's going to happen this offseason with James Harden, but I don't think that he agrees to come to Cleveland unless he knows he's getting paid next year and probably a year after that. Because you do have to remember, one of the things throughout this process is James Harden had veto power on any deal that he was involved in. He could have said, no, I'm not being traded to Cleveland. And Kobe Altman even said in his trade deadline day press conference, he said James Harden chose Cleveland as his basketball destination. So I do think that Harden will be back in Cleveland next year, whether that's on, a fully guaranteed deal for next year, or I think probably the most likely outcome is Harden opts out of his deal and the Cavs give him another 1+1, like a fully guaranteed contract for next year, and then maybe a player option for the year after that. I think that might be the most likely outcome for this situation, but we will have to wait and see what things look like when the summer arrives. And then the possibility of LeBron is the hot button topic, right? Like, you cannot think about the Cavs offseason without thinking about LeBron James. And I think it's kind of like the worst kept secret in the NBA that LeBron's not going to play for the Lakers next year. I can't sit here and say for sure LeBron is going to be on the Cavs next year. I don't know that. But I've not yet heard anybody that I've talked to. So, I think LeBron's probably going to play for the Lakers again next year. I've just not heard that. Maybe he does. I would be very surprised by it. I would be more surprised if. So I look at this as LeBron probably has three options. He can retire, he can play in Cleveland, or he can go back to the Lakers. Maybe there's another team out there that he would consider joining. I don't necessarily see it. I don't think it makes sense. But the way I look at this is, of those three options, I don't think he's going to retire. But I think he's almost more likely to retire than play for the Lakers again. I would, like, if I had to do a ranked choice vote here, I'd say the most likely thing is LeBron plays for the Cavs next year. Now, I don't know exactly what the chances of that would be, but I don't think it's something that is implausible. I would, right now, I would probably put the chances, and this is just kind of me guessing and like things that I have heard. This is just because everybody talks about this stuff. I would say it's probably slightly better than 50-50. And then I think the next most likely option is he retires and then plays for the Lakers after that. Like, I think if he plays, it's most likely going to be in Cleveland. As far as Giannis goes, I don't see that happening now, because I do think that while if the Cavs would have been willing to put Evan Mobley on the table in a trade for Giannis before the trade deadline, I think they would have had the best package. But now with teams gaining more access to their draft picks, I don't think that the Cavs have the best opportunity. I don't know that that would be the best package. I also think it very much depends on what happens this postseason, right? Like, it's the one thing I will say, aside from Harden and a couple other guys, like Keon Ellis, I would imagine is going to agree to an extension with the Cavs at some point. He is extension eligible right now. And I just think that they don't trade for him unless they have long-term plans with him in the fold. So I do think that's going to be something, just like he's probably going to be back. I don't think that you trade for him to just have him walk, especially when he's a young player that could be part of your future and somebody that could be affordable, which is what the Cavs need. I also do think, too, one of the things that will happen this summer is the Cavs will get under the second apron. And Tron Javolta, which is a great name on YouTube, asked, realistically, how will the Cavs get under the second apron before next season, and does their finish this year even matter in that regard? So it does not, like, I don't know if you're asking about how they finish in the playoffs or the fact that they're going to be a second apron team matters. So I can't necessarily accurately answer that. Like, whether or not they win the title or not, I do not think has bearing on whether or not they're going to be a second apron team. I would be very surprised if the Cavs are in the second apron again next year. Maybe there's a world where it happens. I would be surprised if that were the case. So I do think they have a couple of different ways, because as of right now, they're projected to be about $800,000 below the second apron. But they have to fill out a roster like they have free agents. Thomas Bryant's a free agent. Dean Wade's a free agent. Larry Nance Jr. is a free agent. Keon Ellis is a free agent. So that's like, they need to cut salary in order to sneak under the second apron. And the two guys that I look at that are not impending free agents are Jared Allen and Max Strus. If the Cavs can sign Keon Ellis to a deal that is smaller than Max Strus, and those are not necessarily like for like players, but they could fill a similar spot in the rotation. And I think the emergence of Sam Merrill makes this a little bit more possible too. The Cavs might trade Max Strus, who's making around $16 million next year, to save some money. Jared Allen, who has been on a very team-friendly contract, and I think is going to have a fantastic finish to the season, he's making $28 million a year next year. And he is going to still be the second best center on this basketball team. I don't know. That to me is a luxury. I don't know that's a necessity. I don't know if that's something the Cavs are going to have. So I would look at it as say, those are the two guys that I could see traded this offseason for the Cavs to get under the second apron. There are teams that called about Jared Allen prior to the trade deadline. Obviously, the Cavs did not trade him, but I do think that there will be some interest in him this summer, and maybe now is the time when the Cavs do move on from him, because that contract starts to get a little expensive. When you're talking $28 million as opposed to $20 million, it's a little bit of a difference there. Now, the All-Star weekend is in the books. There were some good things. There were some bad things. We'll touch briefly on some of the things we saw over the weekend, including some love for Jalen Tyson. We'll do that next right here on Locked on Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more result. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get you the job that you're filling, the premium status that it deserves, at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support this show by saying you heard it about Indeed on this podcast. Again, that is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Need to hire? There's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Today's show is also brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life, but this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can now have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person, or you can connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms, and they work to get you every deduction that you could possibly imagine. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It is a huge time saver, and it gives real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it all for you. So for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. All you got to do, file by February 28th. So take taxes off your plate, get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local. That is TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Thank you again for making this edition of Locked On Cavs your first watch on YouTube. If you're watching right now, please do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for us, click the notification bell, and make sure you hit subscribe wherever you are listening to this show. So All-Star Weekend is in the books, and I think to say it's a mixed bag would be fair. I went into this weekend with incredibly low expectations, and I don't think I was alone in that. I think a lot of people that are fans of the NBA, that are fans of basketball, that are fans of individual teams, went into this weekend with low expectations because All-Star Weekend in the past has disappointed. Now, I do want to echo the thoughts of Locked On Celtics host John Corrales here. The All-Star game last year wasn't bad. It was the fact that TNT threw a party for themselves for 25 minutes during the All-Star game that made it unwatchable. The game itself was fine. And the game itself this year on Sunday evening, I thought was pretty solid. Now, the last of the games was kind of I think the team filled with the older stars, LeBron, Kevin Durant, who, oh boy, Kawhi Leonard, Donovan Mitchell was on that team, not calling him an older star, but he was on the team with the older stars. I thought they kind of ran out of gas, and I thought that's why that final game maybe didn't have the same level of intensity or wasn't a close basketball game the way the first three ones were. But I do think that this was a step in the right direction as far as the actual All-Star game goes. I did not have high hopes for the format, but the format did turn out to go as well as I think anybody could have envisioned it to. I thought Donovan played well for the most part, had that assist to De'Aaron Fox for the game-winning three-pointer. I believe that was in the second game that his team played. So I thought he played well, which was to be expected. Three-point shootout, Donovan just didn't quite make it. Thought he showcased himself well. I thought it was funny that two of the three guys in the finalists, one in Damian Lillard, who has not played and will not play this year, and Devin Booker, who is shooting 30% on threes. So I thought that was just a little bit funny. It is also time to just the slam dunk contest is done, guys. What are we doing here? That was horrible. I don't know that there's ever been a worse one. And then the Rising Stars game I thought was cool. And one of the things I just wanted to touch on really quickly here. One of the things that I did think was cool was there was a video, I think the NBA social channel posted it. And it was which guy are you most excited to sharing the floor with? And there were a number of different guys that said Jalen Tyson. And I think that having the respect of your peers, the way that Jalen very clearly has started to earn, is a really good sign about where he's going as a basketball player and what he has done this year. Because I do think players notice these things. And nobody saw this coming from Jalen Tyson this year. He has been better than anybody's expectations except for maybe his own. So to see him be on that stage, I thought he played well. And to get the respect of his peers and his teammates, I thought was a really, really cool thing. And who knows, maybe one day he'll be at All-Star Weekend just playing in the All-Star game on Sunday night as opposed to the Rising Stars game on Friday night. So that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Cavs. Very much appreciate all the mailbag questions. They were awesome. Really glad that I got to do this and got to answer some of your guys' questions over the course of the All-Star break. Now, on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Cavs, Carter Rodriguez from the Chase Down podcast is set to join. We're going to talk about a lot of things. James Harden's fit, our initial impressions, where the Cavs stack up in the Eastern Conference. We will dive into a lot of things on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Cavs. So you don't want to miss that. Please make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. That's Apple, that's Spotify, that is YouTube as well. And if you're watching on YouTube as we get out of here, please hit the thumbs up button and that notification bell. I'll be back tomorrow with Carter Rodriguez talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers.